What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and in this video, we're going to be running through some of my top trade targets heading into week 5 of the NFL season. So you guys probably know the drill by now, going after players who have underperformed either this week or maybe, the last few weeks, and I just think we can get these players at a discount. Their prices may never be lower, and I still think we're like in that early part of the season. Within the next few weeks, I feel like the trades are really going to dry up in leagues because people are going to be, pretty locked in on what they think about players. But I still think 4 weeks in, one bad week can really skew, your league mates' minds, and they still may panic and trade some players away. So we'll be talking about 5 players in this video. If you guys have any other fantasy questions, you can drop those down below, and I'll be responding to every single person. And then before we do jump into the first buy low player, I do want to talk to you guys about Underdog. So Underdog Fantasy Football, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of it. You can do best ball on there. You can do player pick'ems. You can do weekly fantasy. A ton of fun stuff going on over at that platform. If you guys sign up for Underdog using code Quinn, they will double your first deposit up to $100. So you could put in 20, you would have 40 in your account. Personally, my favorite part about Underdog is doing their best ball leagues. You guys may be thinking, well, you can't do it anymore. The season has started. They have a cool best ball resurrection. So basically it goes from week 6 till the end of the season. So maybe you guys aren't feeling great about your current fantasy teams. Fire up a few of those drafts, get a new roster. The ADP is completely different. Like the, top 12 is a massive shift from what it was heading into the season. So a lot of fun stuff there. There's going to be a link down below in the description. You guys click that. It'll send you to the sign up code Quinn if you're doing it through a different way. Thank you guys if you do that in advance. But let's jump into the first buy low player, and it is going to be Michael Pittman. So this was his 3rd game, and he only had 6.1 fantasy points. So definitely underperformed here. 6 targets, 3 receptions for 31 yards. Now we just got to look at Michael Pittman's first 2 games. He had 22 total targets, 17 receptions, 193 receiving yards. I still think he's the clear-cut number 1 pass catcher on this team. I think you can kind of feed into the idea that this Colts offense is struggling. If someone thinks an entire offense is struggling, they're probably not going to feel super great about having one wide receiver. I think this is a perfect spot to buy low on Michael Pittman. It's rare when you can buy players who could be top 12 at their position. Michael Pittman is someone who I still think is locked in as a top 15 wide receiver. I really like him moving forward. There's this weird thing going on with this Colts offensive line. On paper, they should be a much better unit. I feel like they have this, reputation of being one of the best units in the NFL. They've drastically underperformed to start off the season. I mean, we've seen it through Jonathan Taylor. They have been struggling. I just don't think this Colts offense can get much worse. And if Michael Pittman is on the field, he's typically going to be force-fed the ball. Even if, you include this bad game, through 3 weeks, he's been targeted 28 times. That's still really, really strong production. So he's someone I would throw out feelers for. He's not the flashiest player. He doesn't have the highest weekly ceiling. So I could see someone maybe, giving him up for lower than they probably should. We're going to move it over to another wide receiver who has definitely skyrocketed up my rankings through 4 weeks. And it's going to be Christian Kirk. And he went out, had his first down game of the season, only 8.3 fantasy points, 2 receptions for 60 yards. I think he added 3 rushing yards on the ground, but he was still targeted 9 times. So the volume was there. It just didn't really translate to top fantasy production. Those are the players we want to be going after. And I feel like if you're going to go out and acquire Christian Kirk, you want to push the narrative that the Jaguars offense is bad or capitalize on someone who does believe that the Jaguars offense is bad. We know the Jaguars have been brutal for a very, very long time. We started to see some life with this team through 3 weeks. And then, they go out, they really struggle against the Eagles. I think some people are probably out there thinking that the first 3 weeks for the Jaguars were kind of fluky. Personally, I don't believe that. I think they're going to be probably a league average offense. They don't need to be some top unit for Christian Kirk to ball out. You can also push the narrative that Trevor Lawrence is kind of back to, his rookie year. He was really struggling against the Eagles, 5 total turnovers. So it was not pretty, but Christian Kirk is still the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on this team. He's averaging 9 targets per game. He's consistently getting involved every single week. His targets by game have been 12, 9, 6, 9. They are just feeding him the ball every single week. Still averaging 17.8 points per game. I feel like people were really high on Christian Kirk after the first 3 weeks, but I still think he's in that range where he's not this super established player. He's not a guy who's consistently been a solid fantasy asset. So maybe people think this Jaguars offense is collapsing. They think Christian Kirk is going to regress to what he was, with the Cardinals. I still think he's a mid to high end wide receiver 2 rest of season. And I think you could probably get him for mid to back end wide receiver 2 prices at this point. Also, I feel like these videos kind of counteract because I'll be doing a sell high video also, and that video is pretty running back heavy. So I feel like maybe if you're trying to sell high on one of your running backs, bring in a guy like Christian Kirk, it's something you guys could look into. So go check out that sell high video also. But we're going to stay at the wide receiver position and talk about Devonta Smith. So he came out week 3, just freaking broke fantasy, was dominant, had a massive, massive game. And at that point, there was no way you were going to be trading for Devonta Smith. You would have had to buy him when his price was at a peak. Now the opportunity has opened for you to go out and buy low on Devonta Smith. We know he had a down game, but we just got to look at the overall scope of that outing. It was a poor game. The conditions were bad. It was raining. We saw Hurts kind of struggle. We just talked about Christian Kirk. Trevor was struggling out there. Those two teams were matched up. Plus, we saw the Eagles have the lead basically the entire second half. So, we've seen the Eagles leading games, but they're still, going pretty pass heavy. When you're up in a game and the conditions are terrible, you're not going to be, throwing the ball all over the place. You're going to be pounding it with Miles Sanders. So the Eagles only had 25 total pass attempts. This is the first time the Eagles were under 30 pass attempts in a game. So Devonta Smith only targeted 4 times, caught 3 of them for 17 receiving yards. You could actually make the argument that Devonta Smith has been inconsistent. People hate that for fantasy. You'll see people get upset with players like Mike Williams. We've seen it with Tyler Lockett when Russell Wilson was the quarterback. People do not like inconsistency. I think a lot of fantasy players would much rather have someone go 15, 15, 15, 15 in their lineup than a dude who's going to go 30, 8, 22, 6. And I understand the consistency argument, but in general, you just got to be putting the team out there that you think is going to score the most amount of points. Plus, if you have boom or bust players, they're going to balance each other out. So through 2 games, Devonta Smith has had 2 dud performances. You had this game where, what do you get? 4.7 PPR points. And then we had week 1 where he put up an absolute goose egg. So I think someone could think they're a little sneaky. They think they're still selling high on his big week 3. They're trying to get out from under Devonta Smith because they don't think he has a floor. I personally view Devonta Smith as a high-end wide receiver 3 rest of season. I also think he's someone that could probably break into the top 24. I've just bought into this Eagles offense. To be completely honest, heading into the season, I wasn't super high on A.J. Brown. I was probably on par with Devonta Smith. I really like Jalen Hurts, but I wasn't, locked in with him as a passer. This is a spot where I'm pivoting. I believe in this passing attack. I believe in Jalen Hurts. We know A.J. Brown's going to be the number 1. But I think Devonta Smith is a lot closer to a 1B than he is like a clear-cut number 2 behind A.J. Brown. You still see them manufacturing targets. They're on the goal line. Forgot if it was a goal line opportunity or a 2-point. They're throwing up a jump ball to Devonta Smith, not A.J. Brown. Obviously, I'm not trying to make the argument that Smith is better or going to be better moving forward. But it's not like A.J. Brown is the only top guy on this team. Devonta Smith is going to produce. So I want to buy low on someone who I believe is very talented. I think he's going to continue to have some big games, and I think he's going to be in one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I will be buying Devonta Smith. Now we're going to pivot off of the wide receiver position and talk about some running backs. And the first running back here is going to be James Conner. Full transparency, I was very high on James Conner heading into the season, and that straight up has not panned out. I actually don't think he's on any of my redraft teams, just kind of the way it shook out, but I do have very high ownership percentage of him on Underdog. So, I do have him in a lot of spots there. And honestly, after we saw the first possession of the Cardinals game, he wasn't someone that I thought I'd be going after because it was a little bit concerning. We saw, Benjamin getting reps. We saw Darrell Williams out there getting opportunities. So I was kind of panicking at this point. Throughout the, rest of the game, he got his, he was fine. And then I'm just thinking even though he's disappointed, I feel like right now his value has just got to be in the dirt. He was someone who was consistently drafted in the first 3 rounds. He's only averaging 10.1 PPR points. That is not what you were expecting out of James Conner. And so even though he's averaging double-digit points, the way he's producing is just gross. The Cardinals don't look great. He hasn't been super efficient. It's just there's been nothing flashy going on here with James Conner. But when we're looking at his performance today, he still logged 15 carries, 3 targets. That should be enough of a workload to kind of live up to his, what he was like a high-end running back 2. That's enough of a workload to live up to that price. If we remove week 2 from, his overall stats where he left early with an injury, he's averaging 12.7 carries per game and 4.7 targets. He's also on an offense where he's going to be receiving the goal line opportunities, so we do know he has some scoring upside. People kind of faded Connor, or the people who did fade Connor, they thought, he only produced through touchdowns last year. Well, he's getting 4.7 targets per game, so he is involved in the receiving game. I think as the season goes on, this Cardinals offense is going to be better. When DeAndre Hopkins comes back, they're going to be a better unit. There's going to be more scoring opportunities. So I'm not saying to go out and trade for James Conner at, his price preseason, because obviously he's not worth a third-round pick anymore. If your league mate is going to part ways with James Conner for back-end running back 2 price tag, I think that's something you just got to commit to. It's not going to feel great. He's been rough through the few weeks, but I do think he has a solid workload on an offense that I think will get better. And we saw it last year. He had a strong fantasy performance, plus he has the receiving role now. So someone where maybe you're a little thin on running back, you don't want to give up a ton of assets, someone that I do think has top 12 running back potential that you're going to be getting at a big discount. And then the 5th and final buy low, we're sticking around at the running back position, and we have A.J. Dillon. I'm getting the sense that people are fed up with A.J. Dillon at this point. Everyone loved him after week 1, came out strong with a 20.1 PPR performance. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's a steal. Him and Aaron Jones are neck and neck. Since then, 7.7 points, 5.8 points, 9.4 points. Has not cracked double-digit points since week 1. And I can kind of tell because people will slide in, they'll ask their start-sit questions. And I saw some ones like A.J. Dillon or like a waiver wire level wide receiver. So some people are a little bit upset with A.J. Dillon. They're not a fan of his recent production, but I think we just got to look at the workload here. In those last 3 weeks I talked about, where he hasn't gone over 10 PPR points, he's averaging 15.7 carries per game and 8 total targets. The 8 total target number is a little disappointing, but 15.7 carries is very strong. When we're comparing him to Aaron Jones, they're consistently playing similar snaps. They're running close to the same number of routes, and A.J. Dillon has actually out-carried Aaron Jones through 4 games. So this is not a spot where I'm panicking on A.J. Dillon. I still think he's a very strong running back 2 play. I feel like he's probably still locked in as a top 20 guy. I feel like you're going to be able to get him as a fringe running back 2, running back 3, like in that top 24 range. I think I mentioned it earlier, but there are going to be some running backs on that sell high video that I would go straight up for with A.J. Dillon. Just spoiler alert, guys like Miles Sanders, guys like Rashad Penny, I would still be taking A.J. Dillon over both of those guys. To be totally honest, it's just the touchdowns that haven't been there. Like I talked about with a lot of these guys, that's the reason why you're going to be able to buy them low. Touchdowns can be random at times. You'll struggle. You won't get one for a few weeks. Then A.J. Dillon will go out in week 5 and score 2. It's just the way they kind of shake out. Overall, the running back position has been down. I think A.J. Dillon is a solid buy, especially just like I talked about with James Conner. Maybe you're not stacked at the running back position. You just want a guy that you can buy low on and plug in on a week-to-week basis. I still think A.J. Dillon is that type of player. So those are my 5 buy low options. We started off with the wide receivers, Pittman, Kirk, Devonta Smith, and then a pair of running backs, James Conner and A.J. Dillon. If you guys did enjoy this video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, go check out my waiver wire video, go check out my sell highs. Those should be up on my channel, or the waiver wire should definitely be up. Sell high may be coming out in a few hours. But as always, thank you guys for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.